Hi, and welcome to this live reading from her Blackened Rose, the Blackened series, Book 3 by Isra Sravenheart, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Many believe death to be the end, but what if death is only the beginning of something else? I'll have to elaborate on my meaning. We must go back to a time long ago, a time when a witch reigned supreme. She was both good and evil. Yes, she was both, and she had no qualms about being both. She loved the darkness of the night. She admired the beauty of the twinkling stars. She also loved the light and the brilliance of the sun. It was black as night. A tall tower looked radiant in the distance, like a mountain that stood alone amongst the rest. A white figure could just barely be seen looking out of a window. She was dressed in white, and she was a vision. When you looked closer, you could see her long white hair with delectable curls that framed her face and danced down her back. Her dress was torn with 3 harsh slashes across her stomach. This figure was Lady Isra. She hadn't been seen for many moons. Many thought her to be perished. Even her lover Astrid believed she was no more. He grieved, mourning her tragic passing. It was a somber scene, with ravens all across the land gathering in their hundreds, coming together in that poignant moment to pay respects to Lady Isra of the Dark. However, there she was, standing by the window, alive and well-dressed in the ensemble that she had supposedly perished in. The tears across her dress marked the event, as did the scars on her skin where ice blades had sank deep into her flesh. So what had happened? Did she die, or was she saved from some unrecognizable force? Whatever it was evident that Astrid knew. The question remained as hours after her alleged death, Isra was able to breathe, and Astrid gasped as her life force magically returned. Only one question stood in his mind. Was she still immortal after such an event? He now feared she could be killed and that an attempt on her life would be made again. He had gone away on a quest to find an answer. He wanted to know for sure if Lady Isra was immortal as she had always been, or if she was now mortal. Her restoration wasn't that important to him, but finding out whether something like this would occur again was a much more worthy cause. Astrid had been away on his soulful quest for 3 painful months, painful because he needed and missed Isra. He felt the hurt deep within him. It tugged at his heartstrings as each day passed without her. He so wanted to talk to her, but he also knew he had to be mentally strong. Being away from Isra would ensure that nothing disturbed his focus in his important task. He felt that if he was alone, he would think better, even though being away from his love was pure torture. He couldn't wait for the day when he would find himself in her arms again. He relished her touch. Just wanting to hold her and not being able to was harsh on him. It cut him deeper than he could imagine. Chapter 2. The winds brought a great chill, and the open air invited the cold air in. The late afternoon sun was slowly fading as a dreary gray filled the skies. The figure in white knew the day was coming to its end. Isra looked at the vast image before her. She let her eyes delicately climb the immaculately placed hills, admiring their beauty. She then maneuvered away from the window. Her eyes sparkled as they took one last glimpse of the picturesque scene. But what had become of the rest of the tower's inhabitants since Isra's fated death? Well, not long after Isra died, the freezing spell placed upon Contezia and Clink miraculously came undone. This was not typical behavior for a spell, but in this case circumstances prevailed. It had left Contezia and Clink dazed and confused. They had awoken from it, not knowing why they were there, and with no memories of what happened prior. All they could remember was their hatred. It lay among them like a corpse thanks to Cora's spell. Contezia eyed Clink with contempt. She didn't want him around her and felt suspicious in his presence. She no longer trusted him. Astrid materialized soon after and informed Contezia that she was to return to her bedroom for the time being, as Isra was unavailable. He was stern and harsh as he commanded her to vacate before he turned to the gnome with contempt, proceeding to deal with him in a firm manner. This only caused Clink to wonder what Astrid had in store for him as he stood face to face with the Raven Man in that dingy, damp basement cell. Fear penetrated the air as Clink awaited his impending fate. Astrid didn't waste any time as he banished Clink from the lands in the name of Lady Isra. The Raven Man had seen to it that the gnome had a thorough reprimand. He warned Clink that if he returned, dire consequences would follow. Astrid was satisfied Clink had taken heed of his stern warning, knowing that if he returned, the price Clink would pay would be far greater than anything he'd ever known. Contessia felt great relief when she heard about this, though she became confused as to why Isra wasn't present. But Astrid was cold, refusing to answer any of her questions. Contessia was unable to roam the grounds of Chambray Fell as she pleased as per Astrid's instruction. He told her she could never leave the tower because, although Isra was indeed gone for the time being, her soul still belonged to Isra. Isra turned away from the window and looked back at the room around her. The infamous couch had disappeared, and now there was just a vacant space. An elegant gilded gold chair sat at the back of the room, covered in rubies and emeralds, and in place of the couch a round oak table matched with 4 antique chairs could be seen center stage. Gracefully sank into the gold-gilded chair, her arms majestically embraced the strong-built arms. She turned her attention to a roll of pages placed beside her on her left. She picked them up, unknowing of what the contents would reveal. She began to read the pages, letting her finger rest on the first page. She let out a shy giggle. It was a letter. She never got letters, so she found it intriguing to receive such a thing. Her face began to show a smirk. It beamed across her entire face. The content deeply amused her. Her laughter grew loud. She reveled in the joy the words gave her. She laughed once more as she placed the pages down. Now, what could have made her so engulfed with amusement? She allowed the letter to replay in her mind, her emotions expanding as each word danced as she perused the page. The letter was from the council, more precisely the people in charge of magical matters behind the scenes. Isra fondly remembered the council well from her days in training, where she had also met her recently vanquished foe, Everilda. The council wanted to speak with Isra in person to discuss some perplexing concerns they had, particularly over Astrid's recent behavior. Isra laughed when she read the paragraph referring to Astrid. It said, "The raven whom you decidedly made into a human, despite knowing that such things are commonly known to be met with dire consequence." Astrid had grown into a fine man, dealing with his shift from raven to human in a most splendid way, she thought with a wild grin on her face. Just the thought of Astrid in his human form standing so solemn and bold did more for her than anyone could ever know. But she kept those indiscreet thoughts to herself. She glanced over at the letter again, noticing the just about decipherable date that had been scrawled so thoughtlessly. It revealed that a visit was scheduled for tomorrow. Isra laughed again. "Oh, this should be intriguing," she thought. Isra gave it no more thought and discarded it from her mind, hastily lifting herself from her seat. She maneuvered herself to the window ledge, planting herself upon it. Her eyes shifted as she watched closely. Black skies were slowly being tinted with fragments of light. It was soon to be morning. Astrid appeared in her thoughts as she looked upon the lavish landscape in front of her eyes. He must be lonely, she thought, noting the longing she felt, a longing she felt from him, pulling her to his side. He must be projecting a need for me to be near him, she thought to herself. She did miss him, although she understood he would be back when he was ready. In another realm beyond the bright full moon amidst the stars, Astrid was comfortably sat up in a lavishly furnished bed, dressed in white silk sheets with embroidered delicate roses on the curtains surrounding it. Astrid's whereabouts were unknown, as he had kept his destination as well as his mission a closely guarded secret, even from Isra. He was on a quest in an unknown land where he would remain until he got what he was seeking. As it was late in the night, Astrid was drinking a very hot and delicately sweetened coffee. He felt something strong and pulsating circling all around him. It was driving him crazy, but he wanted more. He felt it entering his mind and surrounding his soul. It engaged his sensitive feelings. He simply couldn't pinpoint this energy, but he had an inkling it was connected to Isra. Ah, Isra. His Isra. What could be said about her? He had been separated from her for many months now. They hadn't broken up or parted ways, but he had taken it upon himself to go on a mission to discover if she could be harmed or killed in any way. He had almost lost her, and it devastated him. But before he could discern what had occurred, Isra was breathing again inside the warm safety of his arms. He couldn't believe it. He was overjoyed. His eyes filled with tears of happiness and relief. He had almost lost his love, but fate prevailed and restored her to him. But only one question lies in wait. Why was she restored after her untimely death? She should have been taken to the deepest depths of hell, because those who are dark eventually find themselves in hell. He knew this to be true for some, although he didn't understand the complexities of it. He believed hell to be a place that one lived in unaware. Astrid had many beliefs and philosophies, but he understood the darker ones best. He didn't completely understand Isra's dark ways or know much about them, but he had embraced her dark path and walked alongside her. He wanted to know everything about her, and so her magic was now a part of him. He paused, finishing the last of his coffee. It seemed sweeter than usual, although he couldn't fathom why. He was sure he hadn't added any sweet ingredients to his favorite blend, but in these small hours he felt an extra surge of sweetness, almost as if someone had sent some very powerful energy source in his direction. Astrid couldn't lie. He liked the sweetness, but he couldn't figure it out. He wondered if Lady Isra was experiencing the same. He wanted to talk to her, but he knew now wasn't the right time. The event would commence when they were ready, but whether it be hours or days was simply unknown. All Astrid could do was be patient, for much greater things lay in sight when the day came for him to return.